Hey everybody, I'm Jay Jones.
And I'm LT.
And we are the Dose Offensive Gentlemen. Now let's talk about some shit. Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to the DOG. Today we have some pretty interesting topics for you. But first, to start to continue the DOG tradition of drinking, this week on Bartender Weekly, we have a special whiskey for you. The whiskey itself is the Bowmore Islay Single Malt Scotch Whiskey Black Rock.
That's racist.
That's racist. Well, it could be. It could be.
Why has it got to be a black rock?
I don't know. White rocks don't hold heat. I don't know what it is.
I don't know, man.
All right.
Rock. I was starting to like this thing until you called it, it was a black rock.
Yeah. Well, we are the offensive gentlemen, so if you're just now getting that, you might want to find another podcast to follow.
Yeah.
So a little bit about the whiskey itself. First, the matured in the finest sherry and bourbon casks, Bowmore Black Rock is a true product of its environment, exhibiting the natural influences of both the land and the sea, which surround the small island. One moment you will discover a peaty smokiness, the next a sea salt tang. All right. Then also they break it up by what you see, what you smell, what you taste, and then the aftertaste, which I thought was really interesting. So on the eye, it's a dark amber color. When you breathe it in, it's a classic Bowmore smokiness infused with raisins, pepper, warm cocoa beans, and burnt orange. You sip it, and you taste a rich sherry and peat smoke, followed by black currant, treacle toffee, and cinnamon spice. And you savor kind of the aftertaste would be a beautifully balanced peat smoke and sea salt, which I definitely like. I like it's not overwhelming, but it's a nice balance.
Yeah, well, so unfortunately, like with most Islay whiskeys with me, I am not really that big of a fan of peatiness, so this is going to be an interesting thing for me.
Well, you're already in like your third glass, so obviously it's not that big of a deal for you.
All right, so the thing is, it's not that it's... I'm going to drink it because it's wet and it's alcohol and it's whiskey. I will not waste whiskey, but I am not really a fan of the peatiness. And that's kind of the reason why we have the coffee chocolates to go with it to help with the taste, at least from my standpoint.
Weak, son. Weak.
Hey.
You don't need chocolate to cover up the taste of whiskey.
Well, I'm not trying to cover it up. I'm trying to complement it. I'm trying to mix the flavors.
Oh, now you're trying to get sophisticated.
I am. I told you, man. Every time I drink scotch, man, I feel sophisticated.
That's true. That's true. All right. So also, so that's a little bit about the whiskey that we have. As in also the custom, we are going to have a toast, and it is my turn to have the toast. I toast to: may the best of your past be the worst of your future. Cheers.
Cheers. You know you're supposed to toast before we start drinking too, right?
Oh, we're way past that point, bro. We've been prepping and drinking for about an hour now.
We toast for the podcast.
Yeah, we do.
We need to bring that art back.
It's all for show, folks. It's all for show.
Well, and the whole podcast is for show, but bringing back the art of the toast should, something to be done. I just want to make those things that we want to make sure we preserve because it's good. But
yeah, it's a very good tradition. It builds camaraderie, right? It actually has a huge historical precedent and significance, which I think we could probably do a very long segment on the history of it. That may be special. Let us know what you guys think at home.
Yeah. So this is a Bowmore. So the interesting about this is that so Bowmore, not Bowmore. It's it's not Bowmore. It's a
I'm calling it Bowmore. I speak
You're
English.
not supposed to say the W. I think
Bowmore?
It's Bowmore. Bowmore or something like that. I'm not Scottish. But so if you are, yeah. I don't know how to speak your freaky dicky words, Scottish person. No, so the thing about this is actually the capital of Islay. So on the Islay Island, that sounds weird to say.
Yeah.
On the Islay Island, it is the home of like I want to say around 8 distilleries on this little island. Well, relatively little, and it's I think the population is only
It's roughly 3,000.
so about 3,000 people, 8 distilleries, and well-known distilleries too, like Lagavulin
And Lefroy.
yeah. So there's a lot of them on there, but yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and also according to Wikipedia, the island of Islay, today it has over 3,000 inhabitants, and the main commercial activities are agriculture, malt whiskey distillation, and tourism. And to be honest, the tourism and the whiskey distillation is probably goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Also with the agriculture for that, because it's only an island with 3,000 people, and they have 8 worldwide distilleries.
Yeah.
I
think those
when I
are
mean
the-
worldwide. I mean like they distribute worldwide. That's their huge. Because everybody's heard of an Islay whiskey. I mean, if you drink
Yeah.
whiskey, you've heard of it.
Yes.
But those are the huge money makers right there.
No, but as for this one, like I said, the peatiness for me, it's a little bit more peatier than I tend to like. You know, I actually do tend to like smoother whiskeys, but it's not terrible. It's not over peaty. It's not over smoky.
Yeah, I would not count this as I don't want to say severe, but as smoky or as what's a good word for it? As hard hitting as the Lagavulin or the Lefroy, because those are very very smoky, very very peaty. To where
We're gonna get to those too. But
oh yeah, we will. But those are like you get those, and it is quite literally like eating a campfire ash. Like you have a campfire and you just like blow it out, and then you just like take a big bite of like a burning log. Like you kind of get that woody, smoky feeling. Because I mean, I've drank Lagavulin for a night, and then I've woken up feeling like I was at a bonfire all night. You wake up and like you have like this smoky flavor in your sinuses, and you're just like, oh man, like I must have been out late last night. No, you were on the couch the whole time.
I do say though, this does pair very very well with this chocolate.
I'm gonna have to have some of that then. So that is a little bit about the whiskey. I like it. I really do like it. It is not not what we've had on the show so far, where it was. How can I say? It was like a smooth finish. This is one of the ones where it has more of the smoky peaty taste. Yeah. And it definitely has a long-lasting aftertaste as well. So I really like it because it has the flavor, but it's not overwhelming.
No, not this particular one. I mean, like I said, it's not. So would I buy this whiskey? I would probably buy this whiskey personally for those people who do like Islay whiskeys and some of that peatiness. Would this be my personal drinking whiskey? Probably not for me.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. This would be probably a special occasion drink with a friend or, in this case, review for a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad, by no means I think it's a bad whiskey. There are some that we will discuss and that I totally hate. But no, this is not bad. It's just not my general taste. Yeah. It doesn't appease my palate.
Yep. So that is the Bartender Weekly, and I just want to remind you guys that there is a clink that you will hear throughout the podcast, and what that is,
You've heard it several times.
You've heard it several times already, and that is the metal cubes in our glasses as we drink. Do not get discouraged, folks. Please take a drink with us. It is very important that you drink with us so that you can keep up with our mental trains. Because we sometimes go on strange tangents and things like that, and you will need the alcoholic aptitude to keep up.
I like that phrase.
Right?
The
Yeah,
alcoholic
just
aptitude.
off the dome. It was great.
That's a good phrase.
I know.
I'm gonna steal it,
I
you
should
get-
record it.
Well,
God,
I'm going to steal it and you get no credit.
Typical. Also, just want to let you guys know. So the location, because I do like geography, the location of the Islay Island is due west of Glasgow, Scotland, and it is much further south than the other whiskeys that we had previously, and you could definitely taste it. And that's
Yeah,
what
you
I'm
could
saying.
tell
Like
the
I
difference.
like that about whiskey,
Yeah.
is that you can taste the region because each region has a very distinctive taste. It's not one of those things where it's a very subtle difference where you have to know what you're looking for. It's usually very in your face. Much like wines, which we've compared whiskey and wine before.
Mm-hmm.
Wine, especially Spanish and Portuguese wines and like Chilean wines, like if it's a Spanish type wine, it will have almost a spice aftertaste.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have like the Italians and some French wines, they don't have that. It's more of a dry pucker.
Right,
Almost.
pucker and a more full body taste.
Yeah, which we definitely need to get on the wines as well.
That's because we were sort of asked to move to the wines.
No, we're not asked, dude. I do what I want. So I have a bunch of whiskey.
It was recommended.
It was recommended, yes, but
Well, I mean, we should take advantage because we actually do live pretty close to a major wine producing region. So might as well. We live closer to winemaking regions and wineries than we do distilleries. So.
Oh yeah, but we're also gentlemen.
Yeah.
So just want to let you guys know, if you have a recommendation on a specific wine or specific whiskey or cocktail or anything,
drink.
Just give us a shout, leave a comment, and just let us know.
All right. So moving right along, we're going to go into our first topic of the day. And the first one we're going to talk about is it's kind of a bad one. So what happened? This happened and took place in Canada. And the backstory to this is a 11-year-old Muslim girl claimed that a man attacked her and threatened to cut off her hijab with a pair of scissors. And of course, this caused a lot of outcry. Justin Trudeau and a lot of people, spoke out upon this because it was to illustrate that, there's this big anti-Muslim hate going on in Canada, and they want to show solidarity and be allies and yada, yada, yada. But when the police investigated, it turned out it was fake. It didn't happen. Now, the thing with these, when you hear stories like these, they do a very big disservice because is there some anti-Muslim groups and people out there? Yes, they are. And for full disclosure, me personally, I am not the biggest fan of Islam or religion in general. So I speak out on it a lot, but I always tell people I don't like Islam, that I do not hate Muslim people. And I never want to conflate the two. If I hate someone, if someone does something in the name of Islam that is bad, I'm going to point out how Islam played into that. But I don't want to paint with a big brush every Muslim out there is the same way, because they're definitely not. Matter of fact, I was talking about a movie I watched here recently that was starred predominantly Muslim people, and it was actually a really good movie. And it showed in that movie, it showed the difference in Muslim people. They were living in that's sitting around Muslim people living in Denmark. But the difference between them. So when you hear something like this, when someone feels that they have to make up a story to to show the hate that's out there, that does a disservice, because one, it shows that maybe there's not as much hate out there as people claim.
Yeah, it's definitely misrepresenting.
Yeah, it's misrepresenting a lot of things. Like, not saying that there isn't any hate, but if you have to fabricate a story of hate, there's probably not that much hate out there that you think. And this goes along with another story from not too long ago, where sadly say several black people in the United States, a black lady and some people actually faked attacks on themselves. They wrote "nigger" on their own car. They were, showing that they brought in nooses, all these things. One was on a college campus, and the thing with this is that that does not help the fight against these bad ideas. When you have to fabricate these sort of things, what happens is when these are found out, what it does is it takes away from your argument, your viewpoint, and your movement, because people are going to sit there and go, well, you're telling me that it's so bad and so racist on this college campus that it's so racist, but you had to fabricate a story to go along with it. And the same with this little girl. If you're gonna now, her motives for doing it has not actually been put out there, but the idea was that there's a lot of anti-Muslim hate in this area, that she felt comfortable enough to do this. And it's like, well, if it's that bad, why did you have to fabricate a story?
Yeah, and it hugely discredits the argument is one of the things. It's the boy who cried wolf, right? I mean, it's and like you said, it's apparently in this area where this girl thought that it was okay enough to, like, she felt safe enough, like it was plausible that it would happen, right? Or plausible to be believed.
It was.
But apparently there isn't any supporting evidence, and that's the thing. And that's the hardest thing, is it completely discredits any argument that she had, to where now anything that happens in that area, people are going to be like, it's probably fake.
Yeah, it's going to be dismissed because they're going to sit there. They're going to do what they rightly should do with any accusations, is they should listen to it, but they should also be very skeptical. I do not believe in the whole listen and believe, narrative that was pushed for a while. You should listen to, what people say, but then you need to be skeptical. I always say listen and investigate. And if it's not your job to investigate, listen and be skeptical.
Yeah. And that's something that we really kind of want to push here, is definitely the lost art of critical thinking. Think for yourself. Try to understand the certain methods and behaviors of what is leading in the news, and kind of how and why people do what they do. I think that will kind of give you a better understanding of why certain decisions are made, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to take into consideration any other additional factors.
Right. Well, and again, most of your decisions or opinions, especially when you hear something like that, should be evidence-based. So the thing about this, when the accusation was made, a lot of people jumped on it, and they made these grand, showings of how they stood up as an ally and stuff like that. Well, now you got sort of egg on your face because, you didn't even wait. You jumped the gun. So you didn't wait. So you made this big thing about, this is horrible, blah, 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 blah. We need to do better. Look at these hateful, racist people here, blah, blah, blah. Well, it was fake. So you basically accuse people for, you denounce, demean and, people for something that was made up that didn't happen.
And that could even go back to the reporters, right? Because they were reporting on this without any actual evidence. It was only accusations. And I don't know if did the girl that was quote unquote the victim or that did the accusations, did she name anybody, or did she just say people did it?
No, she said a man did it. A white man did it. And the thing with that, and I'm not going to get too hard on. She's 11 years old.
And that's another thing. Like, why are we giving credence to that? Yeah. Like, not to say that she's 11 and that her word doesn't mean anything, but
it makes a good news story, right?
Yeah.
When you sit there and say, "Oh, this little kid was attacked," because everyone's going to go with that, right? If you say a little kid or someone who's vulnerable, you consider vulnerable, is attacked, it makes a good news story. So people want to come out and be like, "Oh." Yeah, but you also have to take into account
that should never be right. That should never be done. Which you're right, it shouldn't be. And in this case, it actually wasn't.
It wasn't. It didn't happen.
So again, people just want attention, and they just want to call attention to certain topics or things like that really apparently aren't even a thing, or aren't a thing in this case. And yeah, I feel like this is another like
Well,
shiny penny.
this
Yeah.
is just another exercise, and especially when we tie it in, which is going to go into our next topic. When we tie into these, the Me Too, Times Up movement, and all these movements and stuff, where you have people speaking out, about things, you need to always make sure that you take every accusation. You don't immediately believe it. Like, I think the dumbest people are the ones that, when someone makes an accusation and they want to go to Twitter and go, I believe such and such. I believe. Well, you look like an idiot when you find out it's not true, or, something like that. I say, so no, you should. I'm not saying you don't listen to people. You listen to them, and then you remain skeptical. You remain skeptical. You sit there and go, okay, well, let's see what else comes out. This is what this person says, and then we're gonna see what else that comes out. Because right now, with this little girl, and it's sad to say, she's the girl that cried wolf. Now, if something happened to her,
It's the girl who cried wolf.
Yeah.
They're gonna be like, oh, she just wants attention again. She just wants to be back on.
would you readily
Canadian
believe
TV?
it?
No,
Yeah.
I want it, and that's what I'm saying. It completely discredits the argument and the movement. Like now, I feel like this girl's and her family's credibility is essentially forfeit.
Well, I won't say forfeit, but it's going to call it so.
Well, now I'm going to think so much more critically, and I'm going to want to investigate every little thing they say.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to take it at face value. When typically, if somebody was to say that, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, let's look into it, right? Especially if you can give specifics. The fact that she was vague and just said a man said that.
A white man.
Oh, yeah, let's definitely put that out there.
Because it was D.
It was D.
D white man.
D white man, holding them down.
No, it's just that, and again, not to harp on that, because I really don't want to beat this little girl up. I just want this just to be an example of why we should take all accusations. Not saying that we don't take them seriously, but we just make sure that we investigate and we see what evidence comes out before we pass judgments and make a fool of ourselves on social media. All right. So moving into our next topic, the accusations or the sexual misconduct accusation against Aziz Ansari. And I kind of have a mixed feeling. So Aziz Ansari, I actually followed his career when he first started, and I actually like his show, Master of None. He is a different kind of comic. He's kind of energetic, and when he does his things, and I typically like his performances. However, like most celebrities, I get kind of turned off when they try to talk social justice, and not just so much social justice as when they try to go out their way to virtual signal social justice to show what a good guy they are. If you're a good dude, you tend to just be a good dude. You don't have to sit there and stand up and be like, I am a good dude. I stand up and I believe all women. Because I always say, especially with male feminists or something like that, I say, there's that whole start the clock until they're accused of some sexual misconduct. And generally the rule is, or what we've seen so far is generally male feminists are the biggest pieces of shit on the earth. And the women who support them or like them tend to look stupid because you're like, oh, yes, he's such a feminist ally and you're an asshole. And I'm like, well, I haven't raped anybody, or no one's accused me of raping anyone or, doing sexually harassing anyone. But your ally has or has been accused of that. So, virtual signaling is one thing. It's one thing to stand up for social justice, actual social injustice. It's another to be a virtual signaling dude, because it seems like you're trying to compensate for the shit you probably pulled or keep pulling.
Well, that's another thing is you have a lot of celebrities, and we'll get into the Aziz Ansari case, but you have a lot of celebrities who, the ones who stay quiet are the ones that go below the radar. They don't have any kind of controversy. It's the ones who say, I'm in power, or I'm in for this, and you make it public, and you start doing essentially an entire publicity campaign for it. And well, shit, when you start doing that, you make yourself a target. And every little thing that's ever come up, an ex-girlfriend who's spiteful is going to start, wanting attention and money. See, that's the thing is when you're a celebrity and you take a stance, you put a target on your back.
Yep.
Regardless, and especially nowadays in Hollywood, regardless of how well-intentioned and even how well-behaved you are, you open yourself up because you are a celebrity, you have money, or you are at least perceived to have money, and essentially they can smear your name for no good reason.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I wouldn't even be surprised if some of these, I don't want to say victims, but some of these accusers are even paid off by other people who are kind of want the other person to go down, like the whole conspiracy type thing. I'm not saying that that's behind it, but I wouldn't put it past anybody to say, hey, we just want to do a smear campaign against Aziz Ansari, for example. And, he's a good guy. There's nothing, we'll go over the article in a minute, but he's a good guy, and we just want to smear him.
Yeah. So
we just want to discredit him. We just want to make everything he says, invalid. And,
well, let's take other people. Let's look at Josh Whedon, right? Josh Whedon was very big on the, he wasn't so much he didn't virtue signal so much, but he was very oh, I'm here for empowering women and stuff like that. And I'm like, you do that by just doing it, by being it. If you believe in equality, a lot of people think when they hear me talk and I bash feminism, and I can go on a long rant about that, they're like, oh, you must hate women. I was like, no, I don't hate women. I hate feminists, and for good reasons, and I can outline it. I said, for someone, when you think you want, you actually believe in equality, you will treat people equally. And I'm pretty sure everyone who knows me is going to tell you I treat everyone equally.
Everyone gets choked.
Everyone gets choked. I do not discriminate between your race, your gender, your sexual orientation. I basically look at it I'm not saying I treat you nice. I'm just saying I treat you all equally.
Yeah, equally like pieces of shit.
Exactly.
Thanks, LT.
Yeah. Hey, that's the way you do it. I was like, is it racist when you hate everybody?
I feel like that's equal opportunity. Everyone has the equal opportunity to get treated like a piece of shit.
Well, yeah, and I find I said the thing is, if you're, not saying I do, obviously being hyperbolic, but if you are actually someone who stands for equality, you're just going to act that way. You don't need to tell people, oh, I'm a feminist and I support women. And I'm like, okay, well, really, honestly, unless someone declares themselves that they don't, most people do, especially in this day and age, because despite all the bullshit you hear in the media, we actually have a pretty good opportunities for women and men and minorities, in most Western developed countries. There's not that many, there's still obstacles to deal with, but to act like there's this big oppression that's keeping all these people back is kind of, it is. It's not even kind of, it is bullshit. Everyone has opportunities that they can pursue. Most people aren't good enough for the opportunities they want or they think they should have, and then they rack that up for, some type of oppression. Like I had, I could go in more, but not to get too sidetracked. But
yeah. So let's get into the Aziz Ansari situation. So go ahead and outline the events that led up into the accusation.
Okay, so this is kind of one of those things. So generally, like I said before, when a male feminist virtue signals, you start the clock to find out they're a piece of shit. Aziz is actually, in my opinion, the exception to this rule. He is the exception because what he's being accused of is not wrong. It's not bad. He didn't do anything wrong.
Well, before you even get into that and kind of outline, just give us a quick synopsis of what.
So, quick synopsis. So, what happened was on the Golden Globe, they made a big show. I didn't watch the Golden Globe this year. Actually, I don't watch it in a year. Act like I do. I don't know. They made a big thing about the Me Too movement and, standing up for women in Hollywood and all that jazz. And Aziz won an award, and he used that time to platform and, virtue signal his support and yada, yada, yada. And then soon after that, a girl he went out with, had a date with, goes to through another person who wrote the article, basically outlines a date she went on with Aziz Ansari. And she tried to paint this that Aziz was this, he did something wrong. He was a sexual predator, like he just was like, he jumped on and he just, wanted sex and just didn't, wasn't taking no for an answer sort of things. That's the kind of thing that I guess she thought people were going to take from it. But what it turned out to be was people looked at it, her story, and basically said, bitch, no fuck.
Well, what happened? Like,
So
tell us what happened.
They went out. He went to dinner. And while they're at dinner, he ordered wine. And one of her complaints was, he ordered white wine and I wanted red wine. And it's like, well, words, bitch. Do you use them? It's quite unsafe. Like, nowhere in her article or this, storytelling was she took any like sense of agency. Like, if you didn't want red wine or white wine, you should have asked for red wine.
Yeah.
Or
get your own glass.
Yeah.
If you want to be a strong, independent woman, order your own food.
Order your own food, order your own glass. There's nothing stopping her. So they ordered wine, they had dinner. I guess Aziz was sensing more that's going to go on tonight than she was. And she was like, yeah, he wanted to get the check. And she made this note that seemed funny. She's like, he wanted to get the check and pay for it and leave. And we still had more wine. I still had wine in my glass and in the bottle. And I'm like, bitch, you just said you didn't even like the wine. You didn't want that wine. So how is that even a problem?
Well, even then, you could still pay and then finish the wine. Like, no, that is not even an issue. So,
well, she was talking about because he wanted to leave, and that's why he wanted to pay so they can leave. But again, your words say no. I want to finish the wine or whatever. You don't want to leave just yet. So he asked her if she wanted to go back to his place, and she did. And she walks in, and she said, so one part she goes, I complimented his marble countertops and he took it as an invitation when I said like nice countertops, and he said, hey, why don't you have a seat on them? And she sat down sat up on the countertop. Now, I don't know, maybe because I watched a lot of porn in my life, I kind of think of what this is going to go to. Like, if you ask a chick to take a seat on a countertop, it's because it brings the lower region more up to mouth level, so to speak.
Yeah. It is at a optimal height.
Height
is what it is
to help facilitate.
So essentially, she goes to dinner with this dude, gets mad at the wine selection, then proceeds to go back to his house, then compliments the kitchen, takes a seat on the counter after being prompted or asked to, and then what? And what else?
So they start fooling around, and now, granted, she gives us some graphic. Now, some things I don't know about Aziz's move. Maybe these are my moves. He uses something what they call the claw, where you put your fingers in the woman's mouth or something like that. I don't do that because I wouldn't want someone to do it to me. So I'm not sure about that so much. Maybe what's new popping on the streets. But she said she had displeasure with the claw. But eventually during this thing, she lets him undress her, and he undresses himself, and they're both nude. They continue to fool around, and when he's trying to get into into the punani. She's like, backs him away. And anyone who's made out with someone for the first time for a while, they know, like, you tend to, like, have to warm up. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just go, oh, okay, we're dressed, I'm gonna go straight to the twat. Nah, you gotta warm up. So she's saying now that she was trying to say that she didn't want to do anything, but she continued to stay there. She allowed him to go down and perform oral on her, and she performed oral on him twice. All right. At no point did she say that he threatened her, forced her, or anything. That she performed oral, and she cut it off when he actually wanted to go into a full intercourse. He mentioned he wanted to get a condom. and get this into full intercourse. And that's when she said no.
And what happened at that point?
And they stopped, and she got a little upset and she left. She said, this is all you wanted, this is all you wanted, or some shit like that. And she was able to leave. He didn't force her to stay. He didn't hold her down. It was like try to bang her or anything like that. And then the next day, he texted her and said, "Hey, I had a really good night. I'd like to see you again." And then she goes back. She's like, "Well, it may have been a good night for you, but not for me because." And she said the dumbest thing. And I want to tell everybody this: if you say these words and as part of your accusation or your complaint or anything like that, I'm gonna think you're a stupid motherfucker. You go, you ignored some obvious nonverbal cues, and I'm thinking there weren't two obvious nonverbal cues because you blew the fucking dude
Twice.
So obviously those cues were not you were giving the quote unquote mixed signals during this whole thing.
Well, not only that, I mean, based off of the article that again I will put in the description and that we've discussed, there's absolutely nothing wrong.
No,
nothing wrong. So a guy takes a girl out on a date, pays. I would imagine paid for everything. Right, got her a glass of wine, did things.
And fellas, stop doing that.
Yeah, wine and dined her. Then took her back home, where I presume to his house, right?
Yeah, to his apartment.
To his apartment. Performed consensual oral sex.
Both
ways. And then once Aziz Ansari was like, okay, hey, hey, let me go grab a condom. Right? Even safe sex.
Yeah.
Hey, let me go grab a condom. Actually, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to watch Netflix? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to go do something? There was absolutely no pressure on the quote unquote victim of this, or the accuser. Like, there's nothing wrong. There was absolutely nothing wrong with this.
And the thing about this is that and that's why I say some of the things these movements take away is agency. Women, especially Western women, have agency. They always they have agency. They can say no. They can say no if someone is not saying and I'm not gonna say there's non awkward moments that happen between people, but that's when you use your words. Hey, I didn't want to do this, and she finally did when she said no to intercourse, but she could have said no at any point. She was free to go at any point. And to act like, Aziz did something, horribly wrong by trying to want to get some ass on a date is fucking stupid.
And to be honest, I wouldn't even say that he was just trying to get some ass because obviously it takes two.
It takes two.
Like she wanted some part of that. And, a little part of me even says that because she decided to stop it once he decided to get a condom makes me think that she wanted she wanted more than just a booty call. She wanted a potential paternity victim.
Well, I don't think it's
like
that.
She wanted. Again, I haven't read the article, but just based off what you're saying, it's like, oh, let me go get a condom. It's like, oh, well, I wanted, a little something more long term or whatever.
I think that was it. I think she probably wanted him like to have to be a boyfriend and girlfriend and not be a booty call.
Well, then that's on her own. She should have been like, oh, no, hey, you know what? Actually, after dinner, we should go see a movie or go do a walk around. We shouldn't go back to your apartment because if you are any kind of adult in the dating scene or any kind of adult in general, you know that after dinner, you go back to somebody's apartment with, quote, unquote, no agenda. You know the agenda is fucking. You know that is. Like, and you walk in and you hear porno music right away.
Well, and a lot of people were like, oh, he just wanted some ass. I said, I'm sorry, but today... among the dating culture, it's a very big hookup scene. A very big hookup scene.
I mean, you have apps for that.
You do. And the thing is, so to act like, fucking on the first date is not unheard of. And to be honest, I actually know many people who are in relationships right now where they met someone and they fucked on the first date. Now, some of them are long-term, some of them are not. Actually, most of them are not. But it's something that happens. This is the culture. This is the change in culture we have right now. So where we invite, the idea, because the funny thing is that, we talk about, everyone be free with their sexuality, But when it comes to, when you get into these positions, now it's like, oh, well, she should have done more, or he should have been more of a gentleman, or all. It's like, no, if you're gonna give the signals that you want to fuck on the first date and you're down to fuck on the first date, that is totally fine. So I don't see nothing wrong with this whole scenario, and I'm definitely backing Aziz on this one because in this Me Too sort of witch hunt, this shows you that we don't listen to every accusation. We should not say don't listen to it, but we should take every accusation individually and evaluate them on face value.
And again, something we've talked about on previous episodes is the value of evidence. The value of evidence is paramount. In this case, if the accusation came out, Aziz Ansari had sexual misconduct, it's like, well, actually, he was actually a pretty good dude, especially on today's standards. He went out, wined and dined you, literally, and then you consensually came back to his place and consensually did all these things, and then consensually stopped.
And
there was no repercussions. You were free to do your own thing. There was nothing. He didn't even mention it. He even texted you the next day to say how he had a great time. And so Aziz would be my boyfriend.
Well, here's the thing that I also, I think that gives him more points, I think, in this thing is even when she texted back and told him how uncomfortable she was and, everything like that, he didn't even go like, bitch, you shouldn't have came back to the place if you didn't want to hook up. He was like, oh, I'm very sorry. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I thought we were having a good time. You didn't say anything. He was actually really remorseful because he thought they actually had a good time. And he wanted to fix that, Now, if a dude who just wanted a strict booty call and they want to talk to you, and he was like, well, bitch, I will tell you me. I would be like, bitch gets to step in. If you didn't want to do that shit, don't bring your ass back over to the house. You know what I'm saying? Don't go down on me twice and then tell me you had a terrible time like I did something wrong to you.
His tongue game must not be on par.
That could be, or it could be the claw. It could be the claw. I mean, I don't know how that's sexy. So if someone could tell me how the claw is sexy, let me know.
Yeah, but not only that, it's also the last little article we just talked about where these kind of false or accusations, misleading. That's the very good word for it. Misleading accusations, they hinder and discredit the entire movement, and if you have a legitimate concern and legitimate incident, and you have the evidence to support it, like undeniably, which especially nowadays when you have texting and all this other, and you have all these other kind of voice recording technology, things like that. I'm not saying to go out and do these things, but there's so many other avenues that you can go besides going to a reporter right away and trying to get attention. And we've talked about this before. If you've had an assault, a sexual assault, or any kind of harassment or anything like that, go to the police. Go through the proper legal channels.
Yep.
Well,
I'd say for a sexual assault, sexual harassment is kind of handled in a different thing because
it is. But I mean, any kind of I'm basing this off of the legal ramifications versus the social ramifications.
True.
And again, always go legal, because the moment that you go social first, I think that you don't have any evidence. I think that your claim is invalid or it will be discredited very soon.
Or you're out, you're out for attention or money, and those are, they're not unheard of. But yeah, I'm backing Aziz on this one.
All right, everybody. So now we're going to transition into the next segment about Jordan Peterson's debate on the gender pay gap, campus protest, and postmodernism. Now, this is an interview that he did on Channel 4 in the BBC in the UK.
The BBC.
Oh, sorry, not BBC. Sorry, it was just the UK.
This is the Channel 4.
Channel 4 in UK.
When British television only had 4 channels, Channel 4 was the newest one.
Was the top dog, yeah. So anyway, he was being interviewed by a Cathy Newman. And so We really, really like this interview because it outlines so much about the social environment nowadays. But if you don't know about Jordan Peterson, his I want to say claim to fame, or the reason why he's even in the news, is because he opposed a bill that Canada Parliament proposed, Bill C-16, which regulated the freedom of speech of everybody, essentially.
Well, what it did was part of the bill was, and what she had contention of is, it imposed something what he calls compelled speech, meaning that the basic outline is if you misgender someone, if there's a transgender person and you misgender them, that you could possibly face legal ramification. And that part is actually in the bill. Now, the cases that would be brought against it would probably be hard to do, just like defamation or libel suits. But his claim to fame is that he was not going to be held by compelled speech. That and we'll talk about this more later. And now, but that's what his big claim to fame was.
Now, when we talk about compelled speech, though, we talk about the and what something I like to call the pronoun game. That's become kind of relevant now. Is that the bill outlined many different pronouns that were quote unquote approved by the Parliament. Now, not using these pronouns when talking to someone of transgender constituted a possible hate crime.
Yes.
And so something as innocent as, saying he or she, and the person would rather be referred to as the opposite or something completely different. And we're talking about like really strange words, like words that you don't normally use.
Z's or is he?
Yeah, exactly. Especially the last one. But I mean, anyway, so his entire contention was that if he was going to use those pronouns, he was going to do it on his terms,
yes,
and not be government regulated. So he was essentially branded as a transphobe, as a racist, misogynist, white supremacist, and none of this is actually true. None of it is true. None of that. But I highly encourage our listeners to go out and listen to some of his lectures and interviews.
Yeah, he says like something like over 200 hours worth of lectures. On
I mean, the guy's kind of brilliant. I mean, he is a clinical psychologist, a professor of psychology at University of Toronto, and I just really like how well spoken he is.
Yeah.
So we're going to show a few clips about this from this interview, and then we're going to talk about them. So listen up.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
Well, because there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they're certain to encounter difficult times. And they're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful and vengeful and arrogant and deceitful and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else, and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it?
You help people understand why it's necessary and important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility, why that isn't a shake your finger and get your act together sort of thing, why it's more like a delineation of the kind of destiny that makes life worth living. I've been telling young men, but it's not, I wasn't specifically aiming this message at young men to begin with. It just kind of turned out that way.
And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean,
it
90% of your audience is a male,
Well, it's
right?
about 80% on YouTube, YouTube is a male domain primarily. So it's hard to tell how much of it is because YouTube is male and how much of it is because of what I'm saying. But what I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer, that people have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world. And that also doing so is where you find the meaning that sustains you in life.
So what's gone wrong then?
So that outline, that opening part from Peterson is actually, I think, was really, really good. He actually outlines what's the problem with men today.
I completely agree, and we've talked about this, offline a lot about essentially how the adventure is lost now. The journey is lost.
Yeah, we're in a society right now where so male nature, and I know there's a lot of people who like to argue and all that, and they want to pretend that there's no difference between men and women, but typical masculine nature is competitive and it's adventurous. And one of the things that we don't have much anymore is the grand adventures that we had of the days of yore. We don't have before. When someone decided to set out and sail around the world, it was big news because it was like,
yeah, I mean, we had Magellan that sailed around the world.
Yeah.
We had Christopher Columbus, who thought he made it to America.
Or to the Indies.
Or to the Indies, and he made it to America. We had Lewis and Clark, which went west.
Yeah. And there's a reason we, even with Amelia Earhart, the reason we learn about these people and we celebrate them is because these were the grand adventures. These were the discoveries where we went out and we went into the unknown and, man versus nature and all that jazz, or discovery and yada, yada, yada. I said, well, those are mostly lost now. And I think that is also part of that crisis of masculinity, is because men with a very competitive nature and really the masculine traits are why we have the society we have today.
Right. And I have 2 points that I'd like to make for this. So one is that the art of being a man is almost lost nowadays. Now we don't have the avenues to go on these grand adventures and things like that. So we kind of, I don't want to say sublet, but we look for validation and adventure in other avenues. So for young boys, we have like the Boy Scouts, right? We have martial arts. We have these other kind of organizations and things like that where we look for an opportunity to challenge ourselves and face a hardship.
Right? It not just face a hardship; it's also it's also a path of self-discovery. So you you understand where you're at, and you're right. We don't have those many of those rites of passage as we used to do anymore. I mean, they're still there; they're not completely gone, but they're kind of dwindling, and we need to sort of rediscover them. Because that helps men, men and people in general, society in general, understand who they are. And I always find it funny, like, so, as you know, I am a vet. We're both vets, but I'm an Afghan vet. And I always, when I tell people, like, the reason I went to Afghanistan is that I wanted to go to war. I wanted to fight in a war because, one, it doesn't happen that often, and two, I wanted to understand. I wanted to experience what it was like. I wanted to grow up. I grew up idolizing stories of different warriors and what they did and all that stuff like that. And to actually be in a battle where my life was on the line, I wanted to experience it firsthand. And and I think those experiences, and I'm pretty sure I can many vets would probably echo my experience was kind of eye-opening. It showed me who I was as a person. Not saying that it was all great. It wasn't like this grand thing. Like there were some more very horrible things about being in battle and being in war, but to experience it firsthand, you come back with a sense of clarity. And I think that's the same thing that also drives people to do different things, like, climb Everest or K16 or, do these things that we do, because that sense of adventure and danger and and proving yourself and testing yourself is a part of being a human or being a man in general. And we don't, like I said before, the avenues of doing that are diminishing.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and that's something that I can definitely correlate to the journey of my journey so far. Very, very, very few steps on that journey, but through jiu-jitsu. And it's one of those journeys of constant self-discovery, constant improvement, constant accomplishments. But then also you have to remain very humble because there's always another big dog on the hill.
You're welcome, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But so my second point that I wanted to bring up was that it seems like I've heard the term toxic masculinity a lot.
That's the
And I feel like that obviously is an attack on masculinity, attack on men, and
so
men and women. Hold on, men and women. So we both believe that gender equality is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Gender equality is a thing.
Well, and equality in the sense.
Let me
clarify.
No, let me clarify because I'm
Okay.
posing this, right?
Okay.
So men and women should be treated the same. However,
No,
men and
I
women,
don't think they should be treated the same.
however, men and women are not the same.
Right.
So, and the same in the workplace, yes. In the workplace, a meritocracy.
Well, yes.
100%. You should be graded on your performance alone. And when I say that, I mean when you want to talk about, let's say a salesman, right? Between Betty and Ryan, there should be no discrepancy based off gender, right? If Betty sells more than Ryan, she's a better salesman, period, point blank.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
then you should reward that. You should create that kind of competition within your company that rewards good salesmanship or good
performance.
good performance. Now, within society, there's a thing called gender roles. And gender roles are not always bad, right? There's a reason why they're gender roles.
Yeah.
There's a reason why men are built stronger and taller than the average woman. Now, yes, some women are built better and taller than other men, but that's not really the
those
overall
are the
case. Those are the exceptions.
Not the rule.
Exactly.
Not every woman is Chris Cyborg.
Exactly.
You know.
And so you have, very typically, you have a man who is responsible. You have a man whose typical duty is to protect, to provide, and to ensure that everyone is safe. Correct?
Yeah.
And
So,
then,
when we talk about society and society and how we develop as a human being, or as social animals, is that generally the man is the one who keeps things in order. I mean, you see this and you don't just see this in humans. You see this amongst different other social animals, right? So you look at a pride of lions, right? Yeah, the male lion, is the head of the herd, the head of the pride. And he has a territory. He maintains that. Now, yeah, do the lioness go out and hunt and get food? And one of the misconceptions, people go like, "Well, the lioness go out and hunt." And I was like, "Yeah, but the male lions hunt too."
mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, when there's an intruder or there's a threat to the pride, who goes out to fight that threat? Who goes to face the threat? The male lion.
Absolutely.
And the same thing with gorillas. The gorillas will have their community. And they have their territory and stuff like that. But when there is a threat to that community and stuff like that, the one that goes out to face them is the male gorilla.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a reason for that. And we can go into the science of it and everything like that. But what I want to make clear is that there are quote unquote natural gender roles that people naturally fall into. And just because they're gender roles and you learned about them in your gender studies class doesn't mean that they're bad.
No.
Women can be sensitive and soft and emotional. That's fine. Men can be the very stereotypical stoic characters, emotionless and essentially stoic.
I wouldn't
But-
say so. The idea of the stoic hero, I mean, is something that we try to admire, but I think it means more than that. And and I often look to my father as this, because my father was, I look at him, also a vet, and someone who's done his share of duty. Is that it wasn't so much as that it was stoicism, like he was emotional and stuff like that. He just knew that there was a job to be done, and you had to get shit done.
And he focused on it.
Yeah, you focus on it. Whereas, like, you know what, there's a, I always joke about, one of the things, examples I like to use is in Predator with Jesse Ventura, right? Where they first encounter the Predator, and the dude comes up to him, and he's like, "Oh, you're bleeding," and Jesse Ventura looks at him, and he goes, "I ain't got time to bleed." And it was like, yeah, that is generally what happens, is because there's a job to be done, and you have to focus on doing it. And often men are given this label, or are seen as, oh, men don't share their feelings or their emotionalness. It's like, no, it's not really that men don't have feelings or they don't show it. It's just that we know when there's something that needs to be done, we need to do it. Sitting there and talking about our emotions are not going to fix the problem. If we're hungry, talking about our emotions is not going to put food on the table.
And that's something that men do exceptionally well, I think, is compartmentalization. We're able to say, put all the BS to the side. I have to do something.
And I want to get it wrong. Women do this too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And especially in the rise of single mother households, women do this. Okay, but men, this is something that they have done, and it's actually more of a recent thing. Because you think about it, single parent households are more of a recent trend, and women have learned to adapt and deal with this, so they can take care of their own and their family. But but this is something that's been put on men since time immemorial. So not saying, this is not a one-sided thing. It's not, it's not exclusive, but it's just something we do. Women can do too, but there's something they had to learn to do.
Yeah. Now, there was something else that Jordan Peterson mentioned about, how baby, you don't want a grown baby, essentially.
Yeah.
And what I took from that was that you don't want an adult man or adult male who is emotionally and mentally psychologically immature.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to the Great Adventures and these the rites of passage. Those kind of events within our lives give us mental security, emotional security, because we develop healthy ways to deal with stress. And when times get hard, you don't want a man who's just going to throw a hissy fit. You want a man who's going to put all the bullshit to the side and he's get shit done. And then later on he can cry in bed or do whatever is cathartic for him. But he needs you need someone who's going to turn that kind of that inner frustration into positive energy and do that in a healthy way instead of lash out and things like that, which is you see that a lot in our Facebook videos and our feeds and things like that, where teens nowadays in mid to early 20s, they're like lashing out, or they're doing like the stupid shit, the Tide Pod challenge right now.
I support the Tide Pod challenge.
That's Darwinism, man. I mean, but you have people that are, they're looking for verification and validation from outside sources instead of trying to find their own journey.
Yeah,
and it's a huge. I feel like I'm fine with Darwinism because I'm gonna be a strong gene pool.
Well, you're also older than the typical people, and that's the thing we have to also recognize too, is that we're too worried individuals looking back on the kids growing up, just like our parents or generations before us did to us. And, you want to look at a way to make it better for them. And one of the things I could tell, I could definitely see where crisis comes with, especially our young men nowadays, is they will go out there and they don't see a sense of purpose and a sense of striving, something something to move them in life. The thing that moves everybody in life, whether they want to admit it or not, is conflict. We always are. We are always facing a conflict, and that's what keeps us going. Whether it's
Well, that's the best stories, though. I mean, you have every
yes.
kind of story, every kind of heroic journey involves a conflict.
Yeah.
Everything from the Karate Kid to
it also involves a bully, but that's a different topic.
Well, I mean, that's a conflict.
Yeah, it's a conflict.
I mean, you have the Karate Kid, you have
The Goonies.
The Goonies. I mean, all these stories throughout time. I mean, time immemorial, really. I mean, like go back to mythology.
There's no story that does not involve conflict.
Yeah, some kind of conflict. Some kind of conflict. I mean, you can talk about Homer's, the Greek Homer. I don't know, is it a trilogy or whatnot, where it talks about Jason and all the other
you're talking
Greek
about
mythologies.
like the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Iliads. Yeah, I mean, those are literally ancient stories that are still relevant today.
Right, and when we talk about men, and what like Peterson said about growing up, they're not facing these conflicts as much, because especially in Western civilization, they are to a point where they don't face any of these things.
Life is very easy, essentially.
Yeah, life is easy. Like the poorest American is better off than a good majority of the world, and the problem with that, it breeds the funny phenomenon we discussed before, why suicide seems to be an upper class thing to do. More suicides happen in more affluent areas than they do in more poor and impoverished areas,
and that is an actual statistic.
Yeah, because of the lack of conflict. When everything is provided, or you don't have to really worry about anything, you have more time to have an existential crisis. So men having to grow up nowadays. Now, don't be wrong. Like, despite everything that's going on, why I don't support a lot of things is because women actually have it pretty good right now. They have a chance. They have more opportunities. The spotlight's on them. The media's on them. They get to go up and they have carte blanche. The men, not so much, especially our young boys. They're actually facing a lot more adversity, and a lot of them are actually retreating instead of engaging in the world, because they see that they're facing a world where they're not getting the same support that we're giving women.
Well, and that goes back to masculinity being labeled as toxic.
Yes, that's one of those bullshit things that, honestly, let's be honest. That's something that was cooked up by feminists just to diss men, and
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And some of them were going to say no, that's not, and I'm going to tell you you're a bold-faced liar, because there is nothing toxic about masculinity. The only time masculinity is toxic is when it leads to harm to other people, undue harm, right? But we have that with women also, but we don't talk about toxic femininity. I can't even talk right now. Basically, so when we talk about women, murdering their kids, which they tend to do more than men, we don't talk about toxic, how toxic they are. We find a reason, we explain away the reasons why they did it. Oh, she must have did it because of postpartum depression, or she must have did it because of this, and da. And we find excuses. But when men act out, it's just that toxic masculinity. And I was like, you do a disservice there, because let's be honest, the reason we have society is because it was built on the backs of men. And we need to remember that going into the future, because, and I'm going to say this is going to, kind of piss people off. We had a day without women, right? Remember that? That was a big thing. Day without women. No one cared. Everyone went on like normal. You have a day without men, the world stops.
I gotta see the stats and everything. I mean, I gotta see the sporting
That's
evidence.
true.
I mean, I'm not gonna just.
That's true.
According to the stats that are proposed by every female talk show anchor or journalist, that the vast majority of Fortune 500 companies are CEO'd by
men.
by men,
By men.
which I mean,
But it's not just but it's not. Let's get to this because the one of the things I hate to talk about when they always talk about there's not enough women in Fortune 500 companies CEOs.
so I
But-
see that as
no,
I see that as a
that-
flaw.
It is
flawed
a very
argument
big
anyway.
flaw because we never talk about the low level. All right, still several things that make the world go round is still heavily male dominated. Sanitation, which we definitely need, is predominantly all right. I think it's like 95% male. You don't hear people, feminists arguing for equal representation and trash collecting.
Well, one thing that I like to point out with this is that argument is, I believe, completely invalid, based upon essentially equal opportunity. So, what is to stop a woman from creating her own company and making it rise?
Well, you know what?
There's really nothing.
Actually, no. This is actually really funny.
Okay, go for it.
We can look this up later, but we'll probably talk about it later in a later podcast. But there was a company there. A woman did just that. She started her own media company, and it was completely 100% staffed by women. You know why you don't hear about it?
Why is that?
Because the biggest obstacle for making that company rise was the other women, and she actually wrote an article about this, and we'll link it down in the podcast there. But she basically said it was basically this: she didn't realize how much catfighting was going on between women that it's too much. It's so much it tanked her whole company. Because it was the biggest obstacle that holds women back from succeeding is not men, it's other women.
I mean, I can't say no to that.
It's
be honest.
true. It's a true story. And and I always point out one of the movies I really loved coming out was Mad Max Fury Road, right?
Yeah, the new one with Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy.
Yep. Oh yeah, Tom. I'm gonna be Venom soon, Hardy.
Yeah.
But one of the things I pointed out in that movie, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, Mad Max, this is a feminist movie. This is about the women," and it was mostly women with one male who was kind of good. Every other male in the movie was considered bad.
Yeah.
Right. But it was mostly, we were supposed to root for Charlize's character and stuff like that. I was like, I wanted to point out one thing. The whole purpose was to get Charlie and the women, the maidens, to this society of women. This whole community of women. And then when they got there, what happened? There was no community.
It was all gone.
It was all gone. It collapsed because it was 100% composed of women. And
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I want to point this out too, and I'm trying not to do this as a we're gonna freaking bash women, because this is not really a bash women thing. It's more of a why women still need to understand that you need to respect men, and men also has to understand that they need to respect and value women. Is that this? If you look at every survival show we've had, whether it was Survivor USA or The Island with Bear Grylls, when they pitted men versus women.
That one is very good. And to be honest, they're not even, and so for the viewers at home, I highly recommend you take a look at these episodes. But it's not men versus women. What it is they essentially...
the Bear Grylls... Well,
but it's not Survivor where they're doing like competing games. All it is there's one
the
island
Bear
with
Grylls
men.
was, but the Survivor was men versus women.
Yeah, I'm talking about Bear Grylls.
Yeah.
So the Bear Grylls one was a group of men on an island and a group of women on a separate island. And they essentially documented how they progressed individually. Mm-hmm. Now, they had zero interaction with each other, and I think that it says a lot about how each gender works together amongst themselves. Now, again, I'm going to backtrack a little bit as to what you mentioned earlier was we all need to kind of respect each other.
Yeah.
But, you hear a lot of banter and negative comments about the gender roles and things like that. One, there's a reason why there's gender roles. There's a reason why, men do the hunting and women do the gathering kind of thing, right? We're not saying that
And this is
You-
not to say that women can be hunters, because
No,
we
no,
both know
yeah.
a woman who is a great hunter, and she provides us
Absolutely.
with.
And she is our crack dealer.
She is.
And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there are a reason why there's are these roles, and these roles have got humanity through society for thousands of years, right? So, we just need to respect that kind of historical heritage, and then respect each other's abilities to do things. Now,
contribute.
us here at the DOG, we believe in a meritocracy.
Yep.
We
definitely.
want to judge everybody not by what they represent, but what they
What
have
you can
accomplished and what you can provide to the team. Essentially, if you are a great hunter, right, or if you're a 5'1" female basketball player and you can dunk and score 50 points a game, you're on the team. I don't care that you're a female. I care that you can
I'd
score
be
50
more
points.
impressed that you're 5'1" and you
Right.
can dunk. I
Right.
would definitely put you on the
Right,
team.
Muggsy Bogues. But that's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Is we don't care about your history or things like that. We care about what you bring to the constructive
And I think
social structure.
I think societies are like that. Like I always point out, this is one clip from The Simpsons that I always like, where Lisa. So Lisa on The Simpsons is she's a feminist woman, and she's always want to stand up for these women's rights. So she goes to this one part where she goes to the football practice, and she's like, "I want to go out for football." That's right. A girl wants to play football, and Ned Flanders is the coach, and he goes, "Oh, great, come on out. There's already 3 girls on the team already." And then when she realized, oh shit, there's already 3 girls there, she's like, never mind. And I said, yeah, because a lot of this is grandstanding. Said for the most part, and I will tell you, when I was in high school, we actually had I wrestled. I played football and wrestled, but I will tell you this: we had girls on both my football team and on our wrestling team. And if they were in wrestling, I think wrestling is more of a meritocracy than football, because we used to do these things called wrestle-offs, right? So if you wanted, we're about to do a duel, and you wanted to go out there and you're the guy that's going to score points for your school, you had to do a wrestle-off in practice. So the people in your weight category, you wrestle off against them. The one who won is the guy that represents the school. So the girls that represented our schools
are the best in that weight category.
That were the best in their weight category. And the same thing in our when I was in the Army, when we did our combatives were not separated between male and female. And this is one thing that I always appreciated, and I was a combatives instructor when I was in the military or in the Army at one point, is that we didn't separate the women and the men when it came to training and in competition, because you didn't know you didn't have a choice of who you got to fight on the battlefield, right?
Completely right, yeah.
All right. So we had women that would compete in our annual combatives tournament all the time, and I could tell you, I don't want to name them here, but I could tell you there were several women. Now, be granted, in all fairness and inevitability, none of them progressed past the final rounds, but there was many that actually won their bouts. 3, 4, or 2 to 3 bouts into the tournament. And as you get higher up, obviously the cream of the crop, the best of the best are going to come through. And I'm sorry, there's not many women that are going to be able to compete with men in a combative scenario. But we showed that there are women out there that can hold their own against some men. And given our enemy at the time, our women would kick the shit out of a lot of the combatant men.
Well, that's another thing is, a trained woman who's familiar with combatives would essentially dominate the crap out of the normal everyday guy, the one who has no martial arts or combative training, and that just goes back to training. That doesn't go back to gender and like that. That goes back to this woman knows how to handle herself.
Well, we had one. She was taught much like me. She was in the judo since she was like a little kid. Like I started judo when I was like 7 years old, and pretty much continued it to this point. It didn't morph into like BJJ, MMA, and stuff like that, but was introduced real young, and she was actually really, really good. Really, really good. So when she went out there to, I think it was our second combatives tournament, she went out there against a couple of guys, and most of the guys that compete in this thing, these are guys from combat arms, things. We had, guys from the Ranger Bat. We had like a lot of infantry dudes and stuff like that. Not totally, because I'll tell you right now, the baddest dude in second Ranger Bat was the cook, bar none. So
Nice.
the MOS didn't necessarily denote who was the better fighter. But she went out there and she made it to the third round, and she submitted everyone she came to. Now, when she got to again higher up, she eventually got beat by a better fighter. But yeah, she was really good. And there was another officer, and I watched her bouts really closely. Versus it was in one of our televised events. She was a scrapper. A lot of guys that went out there who dismissed her right away found themselves on the bad side of a choke. So,
and that goes back to meritocracy. You're valued by what you can bring to the team, and that's essentially what this entire part is about. So to recap, what Jordan Peterson was saying was that you don't want someone who is emotionally and mentally insecure and immature. And here at the DOG, we believe that you need to have these kind of crucible moments in order to build character, create mental and psychological stability, and safe. Yeah, I know, right? I like using synonyms. And also, but to create healthy coping mechanisms for yourself when dealing with essentially these problem times. Everyone's going to face stressors in their life, and you have these people who would rather go to McDonald's and cause a fucking scene because they're out of ketchup or some bullshit like that, and instead of just kind of being like, oh well, that's another thing. Can't no ketchup with my fries.
Right.
Find
a way to
deal
deal with it. Take your ass to freaking fucking Publix or something.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to cause a scene and seem emotionally
or
and
Safeway or Safeway. I don't know.
Whatever place you're at. You don't want to seem mentally and emotionally secure or insecure in that regard, and going through these kind of crucible moments, like I said before, create this foundation of stability. And that's I think what no going through them and coming out the side with going through them, the rites of passage.
True.
Those coming through that and being a functional member of society, that provides, or that gives us as men, I believe, a feeling of value, I would say. Because now we can be a functioning members of society. We have certain roles that we just discussed,
and responsibilities.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. So roles and responsibilities within relationships, within societies. Just because men and women are different does not mean that we should be treated different. Men and women have different gender roles as being seen historically.
And it's not a bad thing.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that once we come to work and society, things like that, sometimes we have to look at the meritocracy of people versus based off gender and demographics. We need to see what kind of value they're bringing to a company and things like that.
So and this is all good thing, but I want to get to this last part real quick, because I think this part where in the interview where Peterson talks about where this was brought up, and this talks about freedom of speech and being offensive, and of course based off of our name, we absolutely believe in that you need to be offensive. And going to this thing, there's many rights that we people have, but the right to not be offended is not a right. It's not a right protected by the Constitution and. Well, okay, in the United States, it's not a right, but in different places, and I think actually globally, you do not have a right to not be offended. And being offensive is how you get to truth.
Well, being offensive or being offended is a choice, I feel like, because the simplest thing can offend somebody. The way I order tater tots in the cafeteria could offend the person who who would prefer French fries.
True, but see, so the thing with offense is never given. Offense is always taken.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, so we're gonna go to this part here, and I love this moment in this interview.
You cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I've exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on.
So
and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
ha, gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did.
So that part there, I think that sums up a lot, and that's what's really missed in a lot of society. And what Peterson said here, and oh, by the way, for you guys that are listening, there's a lot of people who are going to say that Peterson's white nationalist and he supports the alt-right and all that.
No, we already disproved all of that.
All that shit. I am not a white dude, and I listen to this guy all the time. And be fair, I disagree with some parts of what he says, especially when it comes to religion. But everything else, I'm in lockstep with, because I think he brings very valid points to the table. And what he just said here was a very valid point. In order to get the truth, you have to risk being offensive. So
absolutely. And what we just talked about was offense is never given, it's always taken. So even when you're discussing religion, right? Let's say Islam to Christianity, right? They're both speaking on religion, but one religion or one speaker is going to offend the other based off of their historical text, based off of the Quran versus the Bible, things like that. So, if you cannot be objective to something, then you are already at fault.
Exactly, and one of the things, a mantra that's put out today is facts don't care about your feelings. I know people attribute this to different people, but this has been going on for a while. Is because we've seen a lot of people who value their feeling, their emotional response over facts, and this is not something we should base a society on, completely. If I tell you, drinking bleach will kill you, just because you feel that you should be able to drink bleach doesn't mean that it's not harmful.
That's Darwinism at that point.
True.
Just let the guys who think that bleach is a Gatorade, just let that shit slide, and then we'll be a stronger gene pool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I kind of agree with that. But like this, for instance, I wanted when we addressed a lot of the different feels people have. If someone tells me they feel like they're a wolf, do I believe? Should I tell? Should I withhold saying no, motherfucker? You're not a wolf. You're a human being. You're a primate, and this is what you're a Homo sapien. Just because he feels that he should be a wolf.
Well, I think that, so you're talking about something completely different than trans. You're talking like trans species at that point.
Well, I'm talking about other kin, but that's
I know what you're talking about. But so that's again, like we said, a whole nother bag of fucking tricks.
Yeah, but do I sit there and validate his feelings versus the objective facts?
Well, to be honest, that goes back to our other previous discussion about emotional and psychological maturity. I would feel that they do not have realistic or ideal emotional coping mechanisms to deal with how their life is. They're essentially in this pretend world where they feel like they need to pretend to be a wolf or a dragon or some other kind of species to get through life.
Right. And it comes twofold. So going back to what we're talking about here, when I talk about freedom of speech, and I equate freedom of speech with freedom of expression, right? You're allowed to freely express yourself and freely speak your mind. However, it's a double-edged sword, because you are able to express yourself should not negate someone else being able to express theirs, and vice versa. Same thing with speech. So when we talk about freedom of speech and why is it important, is because the best way to beat bad ideas is to let them be heard, right? We don't want, I constantly say, I don't want a covert racist running around. I want the racist that I know who, if someone's racist, I'd rather know that up front and let him voice his opinions. And the best way to deal with that is to allow me to voice mine, because given the examples we had, not one racist, white supremacist, Klan member, or whatever bigot has ever converted or changed their mind on their position through violence and censorship.
I agree, and there's actually a Mark Twain quote that sums it up very beautifully, and that essentially, travel is fatal to ignorance and bigotry.
Yeah, but I'm gonna get it more modern.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go Game of Thrones on them.
yeah, that works.
Yeah. When you silence someone, you're not showing people that person is, that person is wrong. You're showing that you're afraid of what they have to say.
Completely true. However, that's kind of like the reaction to it. But if you're the bigot and the racist in this scenario, and you go out of your initial social circle, let's say in the middle of Kentucky or wherever, that's the stereotypical haven for the KKK and white supremacy. If you go out into the world, into anywhere really, like New York or California or Texas or even into Europe and things like that, the more you travel, the more you understand that people are people.
People are people in different ways, and you start appreciating their differences. And like I said, we're both, one of the blessings we have. Why did I say blessings? I don't know.
Yeah, because it's a blessing that we're able to travel as much as
we
we do.
travel,
because
as
there's not many
yeah.
people that can do what we do. We can, to be honest, we can be in several different countries within the hour.
Yeah, and plus we've been many more, and I know this is, we come from different background, and I'm the more sexier of the two of us.
Well, that's objective, sir.
No, that's demonstrable. But but it's like I've been literally doing this all my life, and you've been doing this most of your adult life. And from that, you start gaining different perspectives of the world and the people in it. And granted, and we should express, is a great thing to express that, and to stifle someone's ignorance, because that's what we see. What we see a lot of times, when we deal with like white supremacy, racism, and or even misogyny and sexism like that, is we're dealing with a lot of people's ignorance. And when you allow them, the best way to teach someone is when they, you let them express their ignorance. You find a way to show them, or not even them, just them. I always say this too, especially when I get into a lot of arguments online and social media. I often say I don't always argue to change the other person's mind. I also argue to change the audience's mind, like the show. Well, not to change it, but to show another perspective.
Yep, the people in the comment section that are going to read the thread.
Who are going to read it, and that's happened a lot, to a lot of people. I've been in a lot of argument, and I do this mainly as a recreational tool. I like getting a lot of arguments on social media. And there's times I've changed my viewpoint on certain things, and there's been more times where I've changed not just the person I'm arguing with, but the people who are spectating.
But again, I highly doubt, because I know you pretty well, that you do not change your mind based off of emotional responses.
No,
you base your opinions off of evidence and actual scientific statistics or facts, or
demonstrable and empirical evidence. I always tell people, like, and I'm gonna steal a line from another person. He can probably never hear this podcast, but I'm gonna steal it. Like, I always, a word I use a lot is demonstrable evidence. You have to demonstrate it, because if you can't show it, you don't know it. And I'm very big on that. I harp on that a lot, because a lot of times when you start challenge people what they actually know versus what they think they know or they emotionally feel, that's when you get the biggest, introspective look at their views. Because they'll sit there and I do it for myself all the time. Like, one of the things Peterson said here that I wholeheartedly believe in is that you should be able to challenge someone else's views, and you should do that with the risk of offending them.
Absolutely, but how? And I'll bring this back. Offense is always taken, not given. So if you're able to have a quote unquote controversial discussion of two completely different ideologies or two completely different opinions about each other. If you can have an actual conversation and debate the ideas and everything, that is a constructive dialogue. And if you can take something away from that and leave, leave in a happy stance and not be upset,
adversarial,
adversarial,
well,
like
to
that.
the point where you don't hate each other, and I think we showed that. We had a taste of that here recently when we engaged with someone who was ideologically opposed to us, and we had a very productive, very inspiring conversation, and then came back the next day and we were still friends. There was no, animosity. It was like. Okay, there's points that were raised on both sides that we need to go back and look at, and it was a great discussion.
Absolutely. And I feel like in any two opposing arguments, there's always the gray area. There's always the area that both individuals are going to agree on. And if they can agree on those topics, then they have a lot more in common than they think.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of times people have more common ground than they realize. So some of the things that we have to always remember going forward is that discussion, open discussion, full discussion is better than ad hominem attacks, labels thrown around, and censorship. So that's where we're going to leave it out at this time. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in to the podcast, and we would love to hear your comments down below. Trust me, I love engaging with people on social media, especially YouTube. So if you have anything you want to say or critiques, I look forward to hearing from you.
Also, if you have any drinks or cocktails or anything that you want us to consume in the beginning of a podcast, let us know, and we'll see what we can do about that, because we are highly functioning drunks.
Highly.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Dose of Offensive Gentlemen podcast. We want to hear what you got to say, so leave us a comment below and hit that like button. Also, subscribe so you can get your future DOG updates.